Imagine my surprise and delight when CCP, the creators of EVE Online, reached out to me saying, hey, we have literally in the last week or so revamped our whole new starter experience. You've never played it. Will you come and check out our game and let us know what you think? You're damn right I will. So let's jump in. Alright, we need to lay down some rules of the challenges CCP put it to me. They wanted a fully blind, unguided playthrough, exactly what we did for PoE, and the same thing we've been doing for Final Fantasy. So that meant certain caveats. One, I haven't played the game before. No! When this launched in 2003, I was balls deep in a different MMO, and then World of Warcraft came along and all my friends moved to there. So EVE, despite me being a massive space nerd, just got left behind, unfortunately. And then it got this reputation as being like the spreadsheet game, which is immediately what the reaction was to a lot of my friends when I said, hey, I'm going to be checking out EVE. EVE obviously wants to kind of change that reputation, so they're hoping to do that by bringing, as many other companies have done, and you guys are well aware, their starter experience into the modern era, because it was still lagging behind back in those 2003 days, and that's exactly what they've done. So along with that, unguided. That means no looking up guides, obviously. No listening to my stream chat, so sorry for those guys, but I think they enjoyed it anyway, of me ignoring those dudes. And it was to take place over one day. Now, that's a little tricky with an MMO. Usually I like a good few days to sink my teeth into the various bits and bobs in order to figure stuff out. But they wanted to see what the one-day experience was like, and if it's enough that people would come back and play it. So that kind of makes sense as what they're going for, as the first impression is absolutely everything. Some extra caveats, though, I had to add into this. First of all, there is a rookie chat in the game that is designed to help people out. Unfortunately, there was a lot of viewers in there who knew me and were talking to me, which meant I had to put that on the back burner because it was another way of accessing me. And no doubt when I would ask questions or release my stream of thought while playing things, the answer would directly pop up in there. So that was an extra challenge that was put on myself that certainly wouldn't be put on a real new player going into the game as well. So, those are the kind of initial challenges we're going to face. It's going to be one day of gameplay, and I think the best way of approaching this is going through my experience of what I discovered, and also my perceptions that got shattered throughout this playthrough. So let's start. First of all, the intro to the game. This was really nice. In fact, one of the biggest things that I noticed was how cool the character creation was. I was actually pretty amazed by the sheer variety of customization I could do on a character that essentially never leaves the ship, only appears in a portrait, yet the character creation and customization was like so much more in depth than I ever expected it to be. I almost expected it to be sort of like a JPEG, just a simple image of my character, but no, fully fleshed out proportions, and the fact that you can change like calf width, thigh width, boob slider, back width, chin, nose, eyeshadow, tattoos, piercings, everything you could expect, but done much better than most MMOs that actually physically see your character in the game. I was pretty amazed by that. So going through that, I eventually made my character, which then brought me into this new revamped intro experience, and it is a blaster. It's an absolute blaster. You got explosions, this big story going on. Everything was like, this is pretty cool. Like, this is pretty cool. Unfortunately, then the game bugged on me. Oh my god, what an impression to make, especially with the thousands of people watching while I did this, is the game then bugged out on me. Now, it was fixed with a simple relog, but I was left floating in space, not knowing what was going on, and not knowing if I had actually bugged out, because it kind of, even though I did actually bug out, it kind of made sense as to what was happening in this new revamped intro. So I was kind of floating around space, that a clue in the world, saying like, is that it? If they just left me to go on my own way or something like that? But no, it was bugged. But a simple relog brought me exactly back to where I was and carried on playing through this tutorial and the introduction to the game as it was supposed to be. And it was decent. But first of all, let's talk about the things that were shattered. I expected more of a freelancer dogfighting experience. Now, you can do that. That is absolutely in the game. But because it's such a huge, huge environment that you're flying around, they have a number of functions in order to make your life simply easier, such as just click on the thing and say you want to orbit it or approach it, whatever you want to do, and the ship will automatically maneuver to where you want to go. If you want to travel a vast way across the universe, and goddamn, when I opened this map and realized just how big the game was, oh, okay. It took me like 10 to 15 minutes to travel between like five different areas realizing that that is like the, the opening zone of the game, and it in fact extends all the way across the entire universe. I was like, all right, so like even getting across the universe is a big ask, yes, and certainly if you're moving a fleet. And I was honestly amazed by just how many people were playing. In the starter intro area alone, there was 500 people just chilling in the zone I was in. In the rookie chat, there was another 300 to 400 people there that were just helping out other new players welcome to the game, which was a big surprise to me, and actually something that if you were a real new player, that's exactly what you would do. So I did a full relog, finished out this cool story, and then just started to drink in every background in EVE is essentially a screensaver. It's gorgeous, and the ambience was right there. One strange thing that happened to me, and I think it's because I bugged out, is actually it took away a lot of my sound effects. Now, I can't be sure whether the sound is removed by default because there's no sound in space. And as I was saying openly, talking while I was speaking out loud, I still kind of prefer the sound of the lasers going off, right? It's the Star Trek thing where, yeah, technically there's supposed to be no sound. The engines you wouldn't be able to hear from space. You do have this third-person overhead view, but I still kind of want to hear the lasers and stuff. And you can turn all that stuff on and customize it exactly how you would like it to be. A lot of players, after I finished this and we started to talk, a lot of players were saying, yeah, I prefer it with the sound off because it's more immersive that way, more realistic. And for me personally, is I want to hear the sounds of guns going off, and I want to hear the sounds of the lasers. This is where I noticed a number of things. One, the ship control is actually much easier than I thought it was going to be. Just giving you basic selections such as approach and orbit, and then working with your weaponry. So your weaponry, it gives you some nice combat missions to start off with. I was a little worried about the combat because, again, going back to my days of playing something like Freelancer or Elite Dangerous, you're kind of thinking you're going to, maybe I should get the flight stick out. Maybe I should play with that. But in fact, no. Certainly against NPCs, much simpler to be able to click on them, select it, lock onto that target, and tell your guns to fire, and then you have a number of cooldowns that you can use alongside that, such as disrupt their engines to slow them, same as you would find in any MMO, block communications, block their ability to lock onto a target, taunt targets, all stuff that really familiarized me with normal MMO stuff exists within the game as little micro cooldowns that you can use while you're in combat, while your ships are fighting backwards and forwards. There was some cool things that went on. Coming back to the dogfighting, is your weapons are located in specific structures on your ships, which means that if you just click orbit, on occasion you're going to lose targeting, which maybe promotes you, certainly with certain weapon setups, in order to actually control the ship yourself, which I think a lot of people would really like to do. And it really depends on how your weapons are set up and how your ship is designed. We should talk about the ships a little bit. As I said, the game is ridiculously gorgeous. Like, the music and the ambience they put into the game is phenomenal. And I definitely felt at times like just floating in space and just drinking it in, because you end up right next to a star, right next to an enormous planet, flying through an asteroid belt, all these kinds of things. And you're like, this is just breathtaking. And that was a word I used a few times because it was. Absolutely breathtaking. Then I got into the ship menu. It took me a while to find it, honestly, because there's no pointer to get there, and we're going to come back to the kind of direction the game gives you to play it. So far, so good. Very simple, very step-by-step. Enemies are approaching, click on the target. Now you might want to orbit it. Now you want to select your weapon. So far, very step-by-step and very easy to follow, and I was able to utilize that for the rest of the playthrough. When I found the ships, I was pretty amazed by the sheer variety of them. And in fact, strangely enough, if we come back to the character creation a bit, initially I was going to join the Federation. As a massive Star Trek fan, that appealed to me, is the idea of bringing peace to the universe, trying to bind all cultures together, find a common ground. I was going that way. But then I saw the ship designs. Then it was like, but the religious zealots just have way cooler ships. And it became very apparent that as you can probably imagine, certainly if you're remotely into space, is the design of the ships is going to be a big factor. And I ultimately ended up choosing the religious zealots, basically calling them the Ori from Stargate, for any of you nerds out there who love that show as much as I do. That was the way I went with it, because I just thought the ships were so much cooler. That's what I'm going to play around with. That's the way it's going to go. So once this introduction was done, I've got my cool ship. I'm now free in space. It's gorgeous. What do you do next? And the next thing the game prompts you to do is to start choosing a career path, because it's a giant political system within the game. You could be everything from pirates that basically just build big guns and go and rob people who are trying to get things, all the way to being a huge businessman, an economist, industrialist. Whatever your affiliation is, your place in the world exists here. And I found that really cool compared to a lot of MMOs, which are like World of Warcraft is kind of combat or die. Their profession system's not really worked out. Or in Final Fantasy XIV, it kind of doesn't matter too much. Everybody's got their own place. The game isn't super hard up until super levels. So you can kind of be whatever you want, and certainly in the story mode, which is a big focus of the game, it doesn't matter what you play. In EVE, it's not like that at all. While there is an overarching story, it's really about finding your place in this universe. How are you going to approach it? And so your career paths will do that for you. They'll be like, look, let's teach you how to be a businessman. Let's teach you how to be an industrialist. Let's teach you how to be a military person, and so on and so forth. So obviously that was my next stop. So I first of all jumped into the military things once I realized that the rewards for doing, say, the military path were not only more ships, and every single career path just started to fill my hangar out with more ships, which then prompted my brain to be like, well, what happens when they die? Because what I know about EVE, and I'm sure the same is for all of you guys, it's that game that you hear about that's lost like 100,000 euros worth of ships. So does that mean if I die, I lose everything and it's game over? And we will find out about that pretty shortly. So I was a little wary about that stuff. But one thing I did realize is the basic tutorial career paths start filling your hangar with different ships. Mining ships, research ships, all sorts of different choices in order for you to start having an array of ships to mess around with and play with. All different designs, all very cool, that kind of stuff. So looking at that was pretty awesome. But I started to get a little bit more curious because, again, my brain, I have heard about EVE, it's about mining and doing all that kind of stuff. So I switched over from the military career path and went over to the business career path because I wanted to see how that goes. And that was kind of where things got a little ropey for me. Again, CCP has asked me to talk about the new player experience. And so far, so good. But here's our first big hang-up. The process is a little... it feels like it's undercooked in certain areas. So let me explain this. The military career path, which is just a simple, it's going to give you mission after mission after mission to do military things, combat things. Go to a certain area, fight some combat, maybe collect some loot, go back and get a next mission, right? Similar that we expect in all MMOs. And that was done in a very step-by-step process. As I said, so far so good. It was like, okay, here's the coordinates, this is what we need you to do. It then gave you a button which was like, do you want us to set your destination to there? Yes. Okay, go. And it'll just go and it'll take you where you need to go. Then I moved over to the business career path. And I got to say, this was an anomalous one because that doesn't exist here. And this is where I really got stuck for like 2 hours. Scanning. Now, scanning is actually quite an involved process if you don't know how to do it. And certainly when I came to the conclusion of this and asked some questions, people were like, it's so easy once you know how to do it. Which is like, yeah, tying your shoes is really easy when you know how to tie shoes, which, you know, it's not particularly helpful for someone who doesn't know that stuff. So in the scanning mission, particularly, I want to talk about this specifically because I think this is where CCP really needs to dial up their game in terms of the new starter experience. All the mission gave me was an overview. You must find this site using probes, then hack it, collect the item out of it. I was like, okay, that sounds pretty good. So from that point on, besides that little blurb and little description, all the mission told me was to return with a piece of paper proving I'd done it, because it's a test ground. So they're like, you're not actually going to get loot in terms of like collecting it from an outside source. We've set this up so there's an item inside it. Okay, how do I do that? This is where it came unstuck, because it turned out it was a very involved process, which wouldn't have been if they'd done a step-by-step process of it. What it actually involved doing was equipping my ship with a probe launcher. Now, it had taught me how to do that. That was fine. But then I had to load the probes into the launcher. I had never done that in the past. Then I had to go out into space. Then I had to open a sub-menu map. Then I had to launch my probes, which I'd never done before either, and I didn't know how to do. Eventually figured that out. Then I had to start listening to sound and audio cues on a brand new menu that I had never seen before. And then listen to these cues to find an area of space that seemed the right one. Then I had to analyze that area of space. Then I had to wait for the analysis and the scan to complete. Then I had to watch a progress bar to see if I got it in the right place or not. Once I had eventually got it in the right place, I then had to travel to that spot. Then I had to hack it, which did have a mini tutorial with it. Then I had to open it there and then, otherwise the hack reset, and pick up the loot out of it. Now that took about 2 hours because there was no clue as to use this specific window and to do that. You have to put your probes into the probe launcher, otherwise they don't work, even though they were in my inventory. How do I analyze space? What does this audio and visual cue thing work? Where is it I'm supposed to be going? Is that a progress bar or not? There were so many questions that came up, and essentially I threw mud at the wall until something stuck in order to figure it out, which is exactly what I have been asked to do, right? Ordinarily, of course, you would have asked in Rookie Chat, you would have, of course, asked online, but my purpose here is to test out where these faults lie. So that was a huge failure on the game's part for me in terms of taking you through that process and not just having it be like, okay, now put your probes in. All right, now let's go into space. All right, now open this menu. Okay, now send your probes out. Now find this location using audio and visual cues. Cool. Now let's just scan that area. You found it? Cool. Now go there and do that. You know, a simple step-by-step for the first time. Because once I'd done through that process once, and it did take me like an hour and a half to 2 hours, once I'd done that, the next 4 or 5 just flew by instantaneously because the process is like known to me then. And yes, it's relatively involved, but not difficult by any means. And it's the same problem we ran into in Path of Exile. The system is not difficult once you figure out its intricacies, because it's actually trying to achieve something very simple. And the process is all there. But for a new player, that process is often very much obtuse or obscured. Now, here's where it gets weird, because I bring up the scanning one in particular, because when I did the other missions that followed on from this, they did have a step-by-step thing. So it could be a case of simply going in and saying, okay, this bit needs a bit of a step-by-step. We've already done it for this one, which was really strange. It was like, make sure you equip this. And I had this in several missions, like, make sure you do this before you go out. That kind of thing. So it was a little odd, and that's definitely where some help could be put in for new players, because I could see some people getting stuck and just not bothering. If people don't want to go on Google or aren't willing to start talking to other people in the game, which is a shame, but people are like that in MMOs, then it would be a problem, because ordinarily people would have quit out at that point. I'm absolutely sure they would have. Now, this is where the strange thing happened, is I got ganked. So, unfortunately, I was streaming, so stream sniping happened. I wasn't frustrated by this, though, because I was actually curious. Like, they actually did me a favor in figuring out what happens when you die. So, what happens when you die, Neve? Well, it is kind of a bummer. It is kind of a bummer. Now, the story takes a little bit of telling, so bear with me and give me a little rope on this one, will you guys? Because I got ganked, I wasn't bothered, I was like, okay, what happens now? I did lose my ship. I also lost the modules on that ship, which included the weapons that were equipped to it, my mining laser, my salvaging laser, my scanning device. That was all lost in the ship, and I ended up as a little probe floating through space. And interestingly enough, it was the first time I tried to use autopilot. I had to make a very long journey. And it made sense to me that somewhere in the game there would be the functionality, because you can go into the overview map, you could select a star system which is quite far away, and you can select waypoints along the way. So it made sense to me there would be some sort of autopilot function in order to allow you to travel between them rather than manually having to do it into each system. So I eventually found it and clicked it and went to the bathroom, because obviously I'm streaming, so here we go, we're autopiloting it. It's only to come back to find out that I've been killed on my way. Oh dear. Now, this wouldn't ordinarily happen to most players. Not to say it won't. Not to say it won't, but this is the actual starting area. And roughly saying, the people who killed me were using ships and lost their ships, because there were people around who were watching the stream and came on the hunt at that point, which were like 20 to 30 times more valuable than the ship they destroyed for me. But obviously for a bit of fun on the stream. But again, not a frustration, because I was kind of curious what happened. So here I am. I've lost my weapons and lost this stuff. So what happens now? Well, as I said before, my hangar was now full of varieties of ships. That was pretty cool. I was missing my weapon. How do I get that back? Well, the market is right there. The auction house, whatever you want to call it, the player trading is right there. And players can build their own spaceports where they can sell things in various areas. Now, the interesting thing is, if you buy something, not only will it tell you the price, but it'll also tell you how far away it is. And that's because you're buying it from a player who might be a couple of systems away. Which means you physically can buy it here, but you need to physically travel to the place to pick it up. And that also brought up that if I'd left ships in certain hangars, they would still be there, and I could have ships in other hangars in different spaceports. Really encouraging the idea that you should have a base of operations that you want to work out of, and that's where you're keeping your stuff. Because you can leave your gear like an untidy student just all over the place, like socks all over the floor, or you can consolidate it and get managed and get it working like most players would do in an MMO, similar to sorting your inventory out. That would be that thing. Then I got killed again. And I got killed mid-mission. I literally got killed as I came out of... So I got into my next best ship, which I really liked. And then as soon as I left the spaceport, I died again. Somebody was waiting for me outside and got killed. And this was a problem now, because all I had left was like a mining vessel and a salvaging vessel, which weren't fit for purpose for the combat mission I was currently doing. So what do I do now? Well, actually, they furnish you for free with the starter ship, no matter how many times it gets destroyed. You can go back to the... When you go back to your dock, it'll say, would you like that ship again? So you're never without a ship. They will give you your starter ship over and over again for free, totally fine. And you can also insure your ships, which I never ended up doing, but obviously insuring your ship means that if it does get destroyed, you'll get a very large settlement amount of money in order to help you get started again, to make sure you don't run out of stuff. Now, so we're not running into a situation like we've seen in a couple of games recently, where you can end up just with absolutely nothing. They do make sure you can keep going, and it's absolutely fine. Just be careful with your expensive ships. And it really instilled in you that sense of danger in the game. And I know some people won't like that, but for me, it really brought home that sense of danger, which was pretty cool. So it took me a long time to recover from that, because I had to travel around various systems. And basically, it started a side quest of its own in sort of building some sensors, so I had to buy them in a system a few jumps away, going on a travel to find there, coming back, doing all those kinds of things. So for the remainder of the day, I finished out the missions as possible, and that kind of brought us to the end of this conclusion. So what is my conclusion on this? What is this new start experience like? It's such a tease of what is to come. And that's kind of where I'm at with Eve, is that it's good enough. And if you use the resources available to you in-game, you should be fine. The game could do an absolute better job of doing some step-by-step stuff, like the scanning example I gave as to how to help things out, but it wasn't overwhelming. And basically, it took me a couple of hours, but that's because I was doing it in a really, almost pretending to be the most reluctant player possible. Instead of saying, guys, how do we scan? Or Googling it, which is what we would ordinarily do, just like I'd recommended you do with Path of Exile and any game like this. What I did find, though, is a really nice sense of adventure whenever things started to happen. It wasn't just a case of mission, go, mission, go, mission, go. It was a case of mission, but this thing's happening now, which are going to take you on your own mini-adventure to sort things out. And even with the very start of the game, I had full opportunity to do that. This is a game I wanted to return to. I'm currently in the middle of something else with Final Fantasy XIV, but it's definitely a game I want to come back and check out in the future, because I barely scratched the surface, and I would say I don't think I had enough time to do a full comprehensive look, and you guys probably appreciate that here. But what I can tell you is the journey I went on was pretty goddamn cool, and I'm really thankful for CCP for asking me to do this and supporting me, including the GM, who was... there was a hero GM who was actually following newbie players that were getting ganked. I'm saying, they'll reimburse your ship. I spoke to them for a little while. I was like, I have no idea. The guy was actually confused. He was like, I don't know why somebody in this really expensive ship just ganked you in a place where he would obviously get killed immediately for doing so. I was like, oh, I'm streaming. He's like, okay, that makes sense. He's like, look, there's somebody else who's just been killed somewhere else. I'm going to go and help them out. So even my good ship, I did get back. One-time deal, I'm sure. But I explained, the guy was really confused. It was nice to see the GM being genuinely confused as to why this would happen. So that's where I was at. Man, I wish I could spend more time in Eve, and I'm no doubt going to in the next few months. I'm going to be finishing out some Final Fantasy XIV, but I fully intend to drop back in because, frankly, I just didn't get enough time. I wanted more. I was still digging through all the little intricacies before going into this massive, expanded universe. It was beautiful. It was breathtaking. I could see myself very similarly to what I thought about New World, just spending time, just listening to music, listening to the ambience, mining asteroids, picking up all that stuff, and then finding out about the political structure, because a simple glance over that huge, huge, huge universe map shows how much people are protecting their borders, making their own little homes, and working with people to maintain them. And that's kind of something I want to check out. So thank you to CCP for sponsoring this video, and thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys go and check out Eve as well. It's certainly something that might tickle your fancy with all the new MMOs that are coming out right now. Thank you again, guys, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.